Hi, I'm Joe Spiro, a product director with DTCC's Digital Asset Solutions Group.
I'm Tom Sullivan, head of Digital Asset Solutions at DTCC.
So Tom, about a year ago, a roughly 60-minute demonstration changed the conversation about what is possible versus what is reality in terms of on-chain digital collateral management. So now, a year later, I think it makes sense to take a look back and reflect on where we were then, where we are now, and what's different.
Our objective at DTCC is to break down the digital barrier by bringing the industry together to accelerate the adoption of digital technologies. We chose to lead with collateral infrastructure by making it the first application on our institutional financial app chain.
Yeah, a year ago, I was at a different firm in a different role, but really inspired by what DTCC was doing, and I'm glad to be here a year later to both reflect on what we did then and really talk about what we're expecting to happen in the future, because it was amazing to do it once, but to be able to do it at scale is really, I think, what we're striving for.
Yeah, so you were a part of the Great Collateral Experiment, but you were from the other side. You were on the client side a year ago, and you liked the product so much that you decided to switch teams and come and join us.
Exactly.
So from your perspective, from the client side at that time, what was your feeling about what we were doing? What was important about it? What did you hope to accomplish?
So as a starting point, it was just so compelling to be able to think about how collateral management works in the traditional way. And obviously you know this, Joe, from your experience. And the work that it takes to be able to move collateral around the globe, the effort that it takes, and the time that it takes. And so when we had discussed what the possibilities were with doing the experiment, it was really aiming to solve some real-world problems of how do we do this process better, how do we make it faster, how do we demonstrate that we can do this in a riskless or save on the risk side. And so that's what I was expecting going in. And then the other piece of it is really the types of assets that could be used and the types of technology that can be used to enable that. And so from the seat that I was in a year ago when I was at Societe Generale, and since we've agreed it's eligible collateral for this agreement, we can now use it to cover our exposure. We had a stablecoin, a euro-denominated stablecoin, and we were really interested in having that be used for multiple purposes, for cash legs of trade settlement, but collateral was a real use case. So to be able to deploy that in this environment was really exciting as a starting point of what could be done.
Yeah, and I think one of the reasons we wanted to have you on the demonstration was exactly what you just said, to demonstrate the interoperability and the fact that you can bring in assets from anywhere, no matter how they were tokenized or digital native. Another reason was because it was important to show that not only the firm, which in this case was Margin Core Bank, but also all of the counterparties are logging into the same platform at the same time, potentially seeing the same thing, which is a complete change from where we are in today's environment.
Right, and when I was sitting in the seat as we were going through the process, it was really dawning on me what was happening, and but I also really needed to take a step back and reflect on all the pieces that happened and that were coordinated through, as you said, using that same tool and same system. And the interesting thing there also was that it wasn't creating a happy path. Here's the best solution for making things actually work properly. We created a circumstance that was tense. That was, obviously it wasn't real, but it was a tense situation, and things needed to be solved in a really timely way. And I think that was one of the things that really came out of it, what you need to do when you really need to move assets and get your hands on assets in a real-time way.
Exactly. And logistically, bringing in people from outside was hard, but it was important because it demonstrated exactly what we were trying to show, which is that you can actually see in real time that collateral movement take place. Today, if I issue a margin call, my counterparty says, sure, I'll send you collateral, but I have no idea where they send it until I see it settle. Now, with blockchain rails, you can see it immediately. And in fact, in the Great Collateral Experiment, we showed that it settled in just a matter of seconds.
Right, and the rules-based tools that are built into it, so you can monitor how your collateral is performing, which assets that you're willing to accept, which assets that you're willing to use, was really nothing short of groundbreaking. And of course, it's what we're building towards now so that we can put that in production.
Let me give you a quick tour of the platform to see how it works. Welcome to the Institutional Finance app chain. All you need to get started is a web browser and your favorite wallet. It seems like features come weekly for the app chain. I'd hear advanced charting and even lending are next. The app chain includes a series of utilities for institutional finance. Dynamic pricing, haircuts, interest rates through oracles are just an example. It includes a set of compliance and data capabilities to enable me to manage risk and reference data.
And you weren't the only non-DTCC person. We had plenty of guests from JSCC, BNY Mellon, Euroclear, Franklin Templeton, Wellington, all coming together to demonstrate the interoperability and just the sort of global and communal nature of this really, really cool product, which is absolutely necessary to solve collateral problems that we see today.
Right, and it is a community problem. It's not something that just the sell side bears the brunt of, or the buy side, or an asset manager. Anyone who's engaged in any type of financing or derivatives trading needs to post collateral in some way, and whether it be bilateral or through clearing agencies, you need to have the universe of participants come together. And I think that that's also in the role that DTCC fills in the market, is to be that neutral party to create standards and to build the rails so that parties can come together in a non-competitive way to define what good looks like and what the future should look like together, without trying to fight each other to say this is our product or your product. It was really, as you say, a community-led, community problem that we're trying to solve.
Yeah, I think another thing that was really great about that event is that it was real, right? So obviously the scenarios were scripted, of course, but when you moved a piece of collateral on chain, that actually moved on chain. When it was allocated to a smart contract, it was really allocated to a smart contract that had things like eligibility rules, haircut rules, minimum transfer amounts, all built in. That was real technology. It wasn't fake.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things that came out of it from the time, you and I had our 15 minutes of fame, but the video and the replays were watched by huge numbers of people. I think more than at least more than I expected. And going to events and conferences in the weeks following, it was really a topic of conversation. People coming up to me, asking me about it, why we did it, how we did it. And it was just so well received. And again, I say that coming from a position of really just a participant, a cog in the wheel of what was done. And that was, I think, when you could really see that it wasn't just here's a piece that we're going to put out, and it really resonated with the market, I would say. I
completely agree with that. There's been so much chatter, so much activity, so much great feedback from that event. It was really well received. Even a year later, I'm still having conversations about it. I think, last week I mentioned that anyone who has not yet seen the Great Collateral Experiment are probably the same people who haven't seen The Godfather.
This is where I admit that I've only seen The Godfather within the past 4 or 5 years. I was very late to the game.
I think it still counts. But yeah, when I said at the beginning that it changed the conversation, it really did. This isn't something that's theoretical anymore. It was the art of the possible, but the possible has become real now.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Tom, it's been a year since the Great Collateral Experiment. 1 year later, what lessons do you think you've learned? What new information has come out since that event happened?
So one of the key lessons, I think, is the interoperability between a variety of assets. And as we said before, SocGen deployed stablecoin. There was the deployment of tokenized money market funds. There was a deployment of tokenized other forms of traditional assets. And they were able to move seamlessly. So that was one piece. The other piece, which I think we were expecting and we really demonstrated, was the 24/7 time frame was really compressed, where you can do things that normally would take a day or 6 hours or what have you, and that happened within an hour. And along those lines, there was also the borderless nature of what we were trying to achieve, and we really demonstrated that. And if we look around the room at the different cities that are here, the participants, as you mentioned before, of who was involved, but in today's world, we're reliant on systems that have cutoffs and have time zones that we're hinged to, so that you may only be able to pledge collateral from the United States to a European counterparty until noon Eastern Standard Time. You have a huge gap between the US and Asia where you don't have that ability at all, so you have an inherent 12-hour, 14-hour delay. And those things were compressed, and by compressing those things, what we really implicitly demonstrated was you're de-risking the process greatly.
That's right. And you're right, to some extent, I think the Great Collateral Experiment was a little bit ahead of its time. We brought in digital cash. The conversation on digital cash has exploded. We brought in tokenized money market funds. The conversation on tokenized money market funds has exploded, and even specifically with regard to their use as collateral. You even have industry groups like ISDA who have convened special committees just to talk about tokenized money market funds specifically as collateral. So these are all ways in which the conversation has really been enhanced since that event.
Yeah, and in fact, given the timing, you think about the US regulatory environment and how it has changed over the course of time. A year ago, that was really only in the early days of what we were expecting. The Genius Act had not made it to the floor of Congress yet. So the fact that we were moving forward with stablecoins in this environment when we were ahead of the regulatory curve in a way, and I think that was super enlightening to the market to be able to see, that the rule changes are coming in the United States. Of course, they'd happened in Europe already, which is why SocGen was able to deploy their MiCA-eligible stablecoin, but that's when you really put the pieces together. And as you said, the markets for all those assets has the hockey stick has really been sharp over the past year in terms of the absorption of those assets into the market, into the growth.
That's right. We had a use case with central counterparties. CCPs are now very much engaged in this conversation, maybe more than they were a year ago. We also brought in Bitcoin as an asset.
That's right.
Which I think to the extent that the Great Collateral Experiment was ahead of its time, maybe it's still a little bit ahead of its time on that front, but it's predictive.
My role is to help us identify opportunities to optimize margin calls collateral processes, managing risk while reducing funding costs. As Dan mentioned, we've recently transitioned the collateral team to a blockchain solution, the Collateral App Chain, and this has significantly improved our efficiency and given us options we've never had before, and better, more timely information so I can make more informed decisions. Our boards recently allowed us to expand our asset classes to include cryptocurrencies, specifically Bitcoin, and this platform has allowed us to manage crypto alongside our traditional assets, reducing our time to market and any enhancements to the platform. And that's a huge win.
Yeah, and if you think about it again, not to spend too much time about the regulatory environment, but the CFTC at the end of last year came out with some guidance and with respect to how collateral management process can be done. And the overarching principle was really that the wrapper doesn't matter, meaning that the asset is the asset is the asset. It doesn't matter what rails it sits. Blockchain rails are better rails for moving assets in a more real-time way. But it does also enable different types of assets to be used. So it really was predictive in the fact that Bitcoin is an asset, it has value. If counterparties are willing to take that for collateral, we can do that, and we've built that into our system.